Yo, so
about it.
that's a cool thing. Well, not cool, but interesting. We were talking about the, local versus diaspora experiences, sure. But you grew up in the UK, so you're like intimately familiar with British, society, class
Sure.
differences, power, structures, whatever. When you go abroad, they've been everywhere, right? They had the whole world nearly as part of the empire. Many of those
Yeah.
places have held on to, like you were mentioning, these sort of old colonial institutions, some more than others. But, now those, like the British have left, but
Yeah.
those ideas of stratified power have been like sort of embraced by the local
Right.
population in that same sort of segregating way. Does
Yeah,
that
exactly.
strike you as weird that people did it? Does it make sense that,
I
people
think
did?
it makes sense. I don't have to agree with it, right? Like I
Right.
understand why it's happening.
Okay.
And I think like you try to recreate the power structures of your former oppressor, right? When you've been oppressed for X amount of time,
Hmm.
you and then there are people who suddenly grab that power and
Yeah.
have an access to it. They seek to recreate the same obstacles for other people so that they cannot take away their power, right? So that's what I see. And like for me, like look, look, there's nothing wrong with these look, these spaces have a right to exist because
Yeah.
there is something about community and people who are like-minded and you sharing space with them. I understand that, but it's the culture in which you define that separation, right?
Hmm.
If it's purely based on like nepotism and like or you have to earn a certain GDP per capita, you're sending a certain ethos out there that like you genuinely believe you are better than some people, even though a lot of the people don't think like that. But it's the undercurrent of these spaces. It kind of the veins,
Hmm.
the kind of culture that runs through the veins is built upon those foundations. And I'm just asking if there's a better way to do that. I'm not saying I have the answer, but I'm just saying there's something about it that makes me uncomfortable.
Hmm.
And why is this important? Because then I see it trickles down to like politics and society. Is that it's a weird sense of like champagne tribalism,
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
that makes sense, right? It's like, and even pre-colonialism, like our communities have been like this, right? We have to
Hmm.
put our hand up and being like whether it was like even pre-Islamic caste systems, whether it was other cultural means of like separating, ourselves from one another, humans have always done that, right?
Yeah.
But for me, I feel like, when I see such obvious and deliberate means to make yourself feel better than someone else, then I feel a bit uncomfortable with that.
Hmm.
And like,
Yeah.
imagine growing up in that context. I think this is what I think about myself because we didn't grow up in much, to be honest. Here, like, you know, we didn't grow up. Yeah, like I grew up in a basement flat, and like, we didn't have much. But like, I always used to think, imagine growing up with everything at your disposal. Imagine growing up with like 20 staff at your beck and call,
Yeah.
right? How does that affect the psyche of a young person to feel like I am entitled to certain things
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
I'm better than this person? And like, I have cousins who have, I'm not jabbing anyone who does, but like what I am asking is like, in the long run, how does that affect our ability to empathize with people who are different from us? Like,
Yeah.
like, this is why I think people in Islamabad are so different to people in other cities is because Islamabad is a protected little bubble.
Yeah.
So if this bubble becomes more of a bubble, and these are the people, arguably, correct me if I'm wrong, but in Islamabad, this is where people are making the decisions
Hmm.
politically in terms of business, all that kind of stuff. If you start to create this safe bubble that is disconnected from all the issues around you, then how are you able to empathize with like people
So
who are
that
going
is,
through?
yeah, that is something that a couple episodes ago I was talking to somebody who runs a podcast out of the US, but it's based on Pakistan's economy and politics and how those two intersect. And one of the things was that nearly like you as a normal person growing up in Karachi, you will never be in politics because you just can't afford it. You're just too busy caught up in your life, your job, your kids, your
Yeah,
rent, all of that. And everyone who is in politics is there because they can afford to be. So they're all massively rich, right? And then there's that obvious disconnect then because you were never poor, not you were never even middle class. So you
yeah,
have
yeah,
no connection, no empathy. It's to an extent not even your fault, perhaps. I mean, you're incompetent if you're not like making an
yeah, yeah.
effort to learn, but they you just don't know. You just care about the tax laws that affect your factories. You don't
Of
care about the
course.
people working in those factories because you were never one of them. You grew up with a factory. So
Yeah,
that's a thing in Pakistan. Islamabad was created, right? It didn't exist until the 1960s.
yeah,
Karachi was the capital, and then they moved. to this place for whatever security strategic reasons.
Yeah.
So that is what happens.
I have like uncles who would be like, oh yeah, this is what Pakistan could be.
Yes.
When we come into Islamabad.
Yes.
And I'm kind of like,
do you want that?
Dead. Yeah, kind of dead.
Yeah.
I don't have to explain it, but look, I don't really have a right to really like say, the political ramifications or what that means, because one, like there's a lot more that I can learn about it. I think what I want to focus is on like the people, right? And like for me, I really feel like all of this has a trickle down effect, and like I just feel like there are segments of society that are so separate. And to compare it with my in a London experience, and I think what's unique about London and anywhere else in the world is in the most affluent area you will have the biggest estates. So you will have like working class people and side by side like the opposite end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
So, and it's a pedestrian society, so you will walk, and even if you're very rich, you will have to see how the other side lives, right? You will have to experience that. You will have to interact with them. They might be your neighbors, right? So you cultivate relationships with people who are very different from you, and what that enables is just like broader empathy amongst people, to be able to be like, know their name, know like a little bit more than who they are. These people become human to you.
Yeah.
Right? And I think there's something in that. But also just to break the stereotype and the cliche, like there are things happening in Islamabad that are so amazing, and like not everyone thinks this way. And we arrived in Islamabad, and that night we were at one of the chai dhabas, and there was like these really cool kids, like live music, and it was free. They were inviting everyone to come to like this fireside, and it was a fire, and they were playing like these drum circles. And I was like, oh wow, like this shatters every like preconceived like stereotype of like bougie Islamabad. We're like moments like this. So like there are like emerging young people doing really interesting things, and like that warmed my heart a lot. And like that gave me a soft spot for Islamabad to a certain extent.